Okay, beautiful. So, this one, as I said, is just going to be kind of a little bit free flowing. So, first question, my brother, is who were you before you became the Brian Coones that you are now?
That's a great question. I was a character that I developed through what I thought would give me um, the attention and the validation and the acceptance that I wasn't actually feeling. So I created a guy who seemed to have it all going on. On the outside, I created a material shield of things around me that, all the checked all the boxes. That I got the car, the clothes, went to the great parties, worked on, it was just a pure material thing for me. But so that was the guy that I created. And interestingly, when I landed in that place, I realized that I was feeling very disconnected to the other part of your question, was the who is that real me inside. And I didn't know what that was at first, but the symptoms of that were feeling really off center, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling angry, and abusing substances to actually feel good about this character I created.
Mm, wow, wow, wow. So, like, why do you think for you? So I feel like so many people kind of go in that direction, right? And to find out it's like, okay, this isn't it. So, where else do I turn? So what was it that you feel had you going in that direction initially?
In the direction of the character I created, or where
Yeah,
I, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of it is just from my childhood. And when I've unpacked it, I didn't realize this at the time, but uh, doing this work, I realized that the little Brian in there who didn't feel seen and heard growing up, who didn't have a voice and didn't really feel that worthy. I think that putting all of those feelings into this, I'm like, well, let me show you. And, so and look, I mean, I grateful for every chapter of my life, and I went all in, and I became an engineer, and then, transitioned out of a very high paying corporate job to become an entrepreneur as I started creating something. And I had some early success, much to my excitement and ultimately detriment. But um, I think it was just that part of myself in my younger years that just said, okay, I'm going to show you. And I took some of that anger and those feelings and pushed into that, and figured when I got there, then I would feel that would be like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I guess.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you kind of went down the traditional path of, it sounds like school and like engineering and that sort of thing, and kind of the corporate path. And I feel like so many people are kind of allured or lured into that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, in my era, it was the promise of, you work hard, you get a good job, you save your money, and then you've made it, So I think it was just blindly following that path. And I didn't necessarily have the courage or grow up in a community or a household that had a growth mindset mentality where you felt like you could really do and become anything with deliberate practice and focused attention. So I was just really kind of following the herd, and I figured, I'm kind of good at this technology thing, and I so I just kind of went that way. It was more of like, I think ultimately maybe a bit of a scarcity mindset in terms of like, knowing I'm going to have a good job if I do this, and I don't want to, all those things you hear growing up about ending up on the street or whatever. So for me, it was probably a bit of fear, and just blindly following the
Mm.
path that was sort of laid out as being one of the righteous paths at that time in my life.
So how did you, you know, how did you come to the awareness that something needed to change within you, that, you know, the path you were going on and the character that you created was the wrong one? And then how would you, like, are there any things that you could point out for somebody who hasn't yet created that awareness for themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And it's like, there was a knowing, just something inside me that just was starting to awaken a little bit, that I felt was off. And, you know, not to go woo woo, but I was seeing numbers for years, like literally 2 decades of seeing 11, 11, and I was driving a vehicle one day, and the odometer, I looked down, and it was one of those ones where the one on the end just continually turns, and it literally, as I pulled up, it pulled up as a 1, so 7 ones. And so I got this like 11 tattoo, and for me that was the beginning of more of an awakening, and saying, okay, well, there is something more to this. I mean, I've created this, I use this recipe or formula to create a life for myself, but it doesn't feel, I feel like I'm more out of sync with the world and nature. I felt like I was more aligned when I was a little kid than I was at that point in my life, and I'd lost my way. And then I was still very stubbornly, even though I'd started doing this work and I was still kind of weaving in and out of both worlds. For me, it wasn't until something catastrophic happened and I pushed things too far, an accidental drug overdose, 3 days in ICU in a coma. Gratefully and thankfully, I survived. And literally then the birth of my first child not long afterwards. Those things all combined for this stubborn mule is what it took for me to wake up and to say, okay, I have a why now that's greater than myself and my children, and I need to go and do this work on the inside. And this is really why, I spend so much time, or I spend all my time now working with other people, because something catastrophic doesn't necessarily have to happen to everybody for them to wake up and say, okay, you know what? There's a little bit more to this whole thing than just what's on the surface.
Yeah. Wow. So true. Can you remember the feelings that you had before you had that awakening, before you made the transition?
Yeah, I felt lonely. I felt really alone. And I felt, only time I really felt good was when I was high, or in certain moments of recognition or accomplishment. But those moments are so fleeting and so illusionary. And so it was just really something that was gnawing at me. And, as I mentioned, I was just feeling really sad sometimes, just feeling alone, and other times just feeling very anxious and unsettled. And I think part of it was that I wasn't really connected to my emotions very well. And I just started to feel into that a little bit, and it didn't feel so good. So I think that's where why I would try to numb myself or distract myself or avoid any of those feelings, and again, those are things I just hadn't processed. I realized later that accumulate through your life. We build up, as Michael Singer says, there's stored junk that we carry with us. And, once we start to clear out the closets a little bit, man, that peacefulness, that flow of life starts to flow through. And then everything you touch, in your business and relationships, everything just begins to expand without that forcing or controlling that you think you have, but really don't.
Yeah, so beautifully said. And that's, I think that's the awareness with these videos that that I really want to create is if you're out of balance in any area of your life, it doesn't have to be that way. Or if you're feeling stuck, or if you're feeling alone or isolated, or, like there's no hope, or even that good enough is good enough. I think we've, again, been kind of fed this narrative that, you know what, I'm lucky to have a job, even though I hate it. And I'm lucky to be this. And, I don't want to ruffle any feathers or rock the boat or any of that sort of thing. And, I love what you said about just really tuning into how you feel, because, you know, if you're not feeling happy, optimal, energized, excited about any particular area of your life, that can change, and you can bring that peak performance into every area. You don't have to pick or choose, and you don't have to sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you know, and you said it well. Like we get stuck because we in that familiar pattern, and it's comfortable, even if it's not serving us or if it's toxic. You know, we hard to believe. You know, we become addicted to the hormones of stress, but you know, it's what happens. And for some people, for some people who are out there rocking it every day and achieving in whatever field or discipline you're in, you're doing it by burning the candles on both ends through those hormones of stress, because you know you can drive through and you can make things happen and you can meet deadlines and hit targets, but it's not sustainable. And you know, so I see people all the time who are in that stage who are they've just had enough, and to realize that maybe you got to step back and say, like, you know, how does my life need to feel for me to be good? Like what, and being intentional about that. And you know, that's a conversation and a practice that that people, you know, that really helps you get out of that place, because as you said, there's so much more possible, but we get stuck in these little places and trapped there.
Yeah, I feel like routine or comfort, as you said, is it's where innovation goes to die.
Yeah.
Right. And so any like perceived, again, back then, like you mentioned, the drug overdose and that sort of thing. So any other kind of struggles, trials, or obstacles that you felt you had to overcome to get to where you are today?
Yeah, you know what? It's everyday ongoing journey. So I think the really adopting the mindset that, you know, life happens for us and not to us. And so the mindset piece was a big deal, because there are days, current day and throughout, and you know, we've had this conversation personally along the way as well. There are times where like, oh, how much more can I be tested? You know, or what is there a lesson here? Because I'm not seeing much light at the end of the tunnel. It's those times in particular where some of the greatest lessons are, you know, and so I think that to answer your question, is what I've learned is to become prepared and resilient. I mean, I call it emotional fitness, where I'm actually practicing things every day, like cold water, breathing to activate my nervous system into a sympathetic mode or fight or flight, and then controlling it back in, physically moving my body, getting enough sleep, getting enough good nourishing food, that, you know, and all those things give me that resilience. So I think the biggest thing I've learned is that it's not supposed to be all rainbows and lollipops, and there's going to be hard days. And in those hard days, when I look back now, I can say that's when I've grown the most. It's that pressure that creates the diamonds. That's the alchemy, you know, and honestly, I learned to embrace that. And, you know, I'm saying that right now, I'm feeling good. There's times I'm like, can I get a break? But no, man, that's the thing. Like, so I think it's like, once I developed a practice and said, okay, I can't dabble in this work anymore. Okay, I've dabbled it in enough, starting and stopping, you know, it's the consistency that creates the momentum, and that over time inspires you to keep going, but you got to keep going. And then when I realized that I can't blame anything or anyone anymore, I have to just take full ownership. No one's come to save me but myself. And the bottom line is you just have to do the work.
Love that, bro. You said so many amazing things there, and I'm glad that you went into some of the tools, because that was my next question, is what, you know, what's your routine like, and what do you suggest for others to do? Do you have anything else you want to add to that for
No,
others?
man. I mean, no, I think that I think I said a lot there, but it's you know, it is the tools that are important, and everybody's a little different, but I'm very very much for having some type of routine, and I like morning routines personally, and I get it that everybody doesn't necessarily have space in the morning, and people work different shifts, and there's all these different lifestyles, but protecting time every single day to do something that would be considered self-care. And those things for me are breath work and meditation, and using those in conjunction every day. I mean, I've been with the Mindfulness Center, as I mentioned, for over a decade, and breath work has just been a powerful tool for me. Cold exposure has been absolutely wonderful. We all take showers. Getting into the cold at the end of your shower for a couple of minutes is a game changer over time. Journaling has been a wonderful thing for me. Practicing gratitude, keeping up with the sleep, diet, and exercise piece, but really just protecting a little bit of time each day to just check in with myself, just a self-evaluation, whatever that looks like for you, and just to say, man, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What's going on? And listening to what's happening, instead of like letting my overthinking mind try to problem solve all those things. Try to sit back and just kind of feel into what's happening. And through that practice, I have greater clarity and greater self-awareness, I think, as well. And one of my favorite quotes going back to the beginning of all this journey was, awareness is the greatest agent for change. That's Eckhart Tolle. And really it's that, just starting to notice more often, like in the moment, waking up from the algorithm, which we mostly live in unconsciously, where we're constantly just in our thoughts, going through the patterns day over day over day, just waking up more often and saying, okay, whoa, where was I? Where, is that actually thought true? Because thoughts are not facts, and we connect and dig into those. And the routine every day, for me, it's a non-negotiable. Whether I'm traveling, if I have to abbreviate it, do whatever I do, but it's that every single day that's so important, because if I don't do that, my day lands in a very different place than it would otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So much richness here. So in terms of maybe what would go against conventional wisdom or some myths out there of how people should approach this, do you have any words of wisdom there?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that, Lee, is that, and I've been doing this with organizations recently, and some like even very conservative type organizations, even in finance departments as well, which are very straight edge. And I would say that would be the force versus power thing, where we have a tendency to want to push harder and grind harder to accomplish our goals. And we want to, whatever that might be, if you want to make more money, if you want the relationship, whatever you want, we have a tendency to push harder and push harder. But it's really having a strong intention, but being able to actually sit back and feel into that a little bit is the power. And it really comes down to, where is our state more often? If you look at the emotional guidance scale, and if we're always pushing or if we're in fear, shame, and guilt, rather than in some of the higher centers where we're actually feeling some type of joy or peace or happiness or love, and not the love attachment love, but just letting things flow through us. And I know, again, depending on who's listening, that might sound kind of woo-woo, but I'm telling you, I can sit a group of finance guys down, we do some breathing, we have an intention, and next they're all sitting around the ground having a conversation on a level they've never had, and their business is flourishing because they're getting out of the way. So to answer that question, I think a lot of it is just like, where is your energy at, and then creating from that space, rather than the old model of driving forward and always thinking about things in terms of competition. I mean, things are abundantly infinite if we actually let things expand a little bit. And really comes down to, where's my state? If I'm contracted, if my nervous system is contracted, I'm going to be very edgy and I'm not going to be flowing very well. But the opposite of contraction is expansion. And so getting myself into states, whether that just means getting a good night's sleep for a change, and maybe it's an intermittent fast or something to improve your energy, dialing those things in, but putting myself in my best situation to be expanded. And then from there, just watching to see what happens, and beautiful things can arise in that space.
I love that. It's like connecting before and being present before all the doing, instead of just doing for the sake of doing.
Yeah.
So good. It's so good. Brother, only like a couple minutes left. So Any other words of wisdom? Anything to kind of leave our viewers?
I again, I covered a lot in the context of this, but I would just say that one thing that I love about what we're discussing right now and doing this kind of work is that it doesn't matter whether you've done a moment of this work internally, and it doesn't matter if you're listening to this and you're 75 or 80 years old. Um, Neuroplasticity is real, meaning that we can literally reshape and rewire our brain at any age for greater joy. We can literally reshape and discharge things that we're holding on to in the nervous system at any age. And so it's so worthwhile to say, okay, I'm worth putting some time into it. Like, we give ourselves to everybody else. And, it's one of those things where filling your own cup first can make people feel guilty. And, often it's really hard to wrap our head around that, but protecting time every single day for yourself, by yourself, is what I would leave everybody with, because that is where it all starts. And once you start to string a few days together like that, again, you just start to notice that when your heart's full and when you're at your best and you're overflowing, you're going to be giving your best to everything that you touch and everything that you are. And the results of that will come.
Absolutely. It's it's like we've been living in this inverse reality where it's like, no, I have to sacrifice. And, having this noble sense of self-firstness is the complete opposite of selfishness, and it's, as you said, once your cup is full, then everybody else gets to drink from the overflow of your full cup.
100%.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you so much.
Yes, brother.
I'm just going to stop this.